There we go. So we just started recording the session.
Awesome.
So before starting, I would like to present our speaker. So Amanda is a resume building, editing, and career solutions for senior and executive level professionals. With more than 14 years of experience, ranging from generating materials for TEDx speakers and healthcare executives to optimizing profiles for oil and gas industry. She is also passionate about helping forward-thinking leaders level up. So thank you, Amanda, for accepting our invitation. We are so pleased to welcome you with us.
Oh, sure thing. No, thanks for inviting me, Nadia. Thanks, Ahmed. Thanks, Luna, for having me. You know, it's one of those things where right now the oil and gas is in a really unique position. We're back at 80, you know, barrels, $80 in terms of, you know, barrels of oil. And it's going to get to 100. It's going to keep going. But I think that what's happening right now is that especially people who are, you know, entry level, who are shifting outside of, you know, the university space and thinking through what their careers are going to look like after spending 4 years getting a petroleum engineering degree. They're thinking through, okay, this past downturn was pretty brutal. What do I need to do in order to be competitive and make sure that I hold on to my internships, make sure that I land a job in a really challenging industry, and make sure that I have some longevity and sustainability in that career. And that's something that's really, really extremely smart to be thinking about right now. It's a big reason why I formulated my my presentation to be the way that I did. So it's going to be framed around, you know, kind of resume and cover letter best practices, reading job descriptions, you know, networking, but also thinking of your skills outside of an industry box, right? So what happened a lot recently was that people were let go, weren't expecting to be let go, and they ended up starting their own consulting side gigs, right? So we want to make sure that as we're thinking through our careers in oil and gas, that we're also thinking through, okay, so I know that I did X as a drilling engineer. What would that translate to as something like an operations manager in construction, right? Because when you're in oil and gas, you got to be smart about it. Okay, you got to be thinking through any downturn that might hit. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. You got to diversify a little bit. Okay, so side hustles are always great. And thinking through your transferable skills is going to be great too. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let's see here. If you hear a wailing in the background, that's my cat wanting to be let outside. Sorry, my door is closed.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
You hear it? Yeah, it's like, wow. She wants to go outside. She sees the dog and everyone outside and she wants to be there.
Yeah, mine is all the time like that as well.
Really? Yeah. And I have two of them. One is sneaky and like a raccoon, and the other one just walks around and she's a diva, wants everything to be given to her. All right, cool. All right, so yep, title, resume cover letter networking best practices. You already did that. Thank you, Nadia. All right, so this is basically a rundown. Okay, so thinking through what skills you have to offer is one of the best ways to start considering how to build or rebuild a resume. Is you need to start from almost reverse engineering. Okay, so you have to think through, what's my target? What do I want to hit? What do people reading that document or that profile want to see from me? And then reverse engineer it from there, right? So you want to work backwards and think through, okay, this could take me 1 week. It could take me 2 months. It could take me a year. What type of timeline do I want to set? And how do I want to hit my target, right? My target might be petroleum engineer, might be mechanical engineer, might be completions. It could be any kind of thing. No matter what it is, it's very smart to think through the skill sets that you bring to the table, because that's going to help you reverse engineer a lot smarter. Okay, so tooling your resume and cover letter, best practices for reviewing job descriptions, because you'll hear me say this a lot. Job descriptions are like a blueprint. Okay, it's like a blueprint for getting the job. You got to figure out what they're asking for so that you can actually leverage that content and build it into your resume and your LinkedIn profile as well. You just have to do it very smartly because you have to use examples from your own experience, right? You never want to just copy and paste a job description and leave it there in a very generic sense. You want to build out that content in the sense of what sets you apart, what makes you unique. So formatting tips for creating that really great document, imagining your skills inside and outside of an industry box. And then how do I network, right? I get this question all the time. How do I network anyway? I actually had like a 30+ year, president CEO ask me that yesterday. So do you have any tips for networking? And I was going, whoa, you just blew my mind. What do you mean? Do I have any tips for networking? You've been doing this for 30 years. So, just remember that whether you're entry level or whether you're, super senior, almost at retirement, that this is a challenge for everyone. Okay. You're in the same boat. Networking is tough. It's challenging. It's scary. It's frustrating. You will get ghosted. That will happen. You just have to be kind of prepared for it mentally and know that if today sucked, tomorrow will be better. Right? All right. So tooling your resume, we'll start there. One of the first things that I always mention when I'm talking about resumes is audience. So, if you are in a university level, you're an academic, you're always thinking about when you're writing papers, okay, who's my audience, right? If I'm writing an academic paper, I'm not going to write in first person, right? I'm not going to say, I did this, I did that, right? Unless you're being asked for some kind of autobiography or something. So kind of the same idea with a resume. We want to use a lot of action verbs. We want to convey content in a way that's going to be very direct, very concise. And it's not necessarily always going to follow the same conventions of grammar that we might think of, right? Whenever having a doctorate in English, I had gotten Grammarly the other day, and it hates fragments, right? Well, resumes have fragments, right? And I'm going to show you some examples of how to write some of those action statements. And grammatically, it may not be great, but that's what you need to do because you're trying to get information across very, very quickly and very efficiently. So, you got 3 different people who are going to be looking at your resume, going to pass 3 different types of stages. The first one is generally going to be a gatekeeper type person. HR, secretaries, admin assistants, people who generally have no clue what you do. Right. And that's when I'm talking about audience, that's what I mean. You have to remember that the majority of people who are reading that document or your LinkedIn don't know what you do. Right. They may even hire petroleum engineers, but they have no clue what you do. So you have to be very, very careful about doing things like using a lot of acronyms. I see this a lot, especially for service companies like Schlumberger or Halliburton, Chevron, Exxon, because they're multinational Fortune 500s, they use acronyms to streamline a lot of their processes. But if you write a whole bunch of acronyms all over your resume, you're going to lose your audience, right? They're not going to know. I mean, I've been writing oil and gas resumes for 14 years. And when I hit, someone who's been in Schlumberger doing product line management, there are still some times where I'm like, what the heck is that acronym? I have to look it up. I have to Google it and type in the acronym and then Schlumberger and then hope it pops up, right? So the second level, if you pass the first level, is going to be a computer scanning system. So applicant tracking systems or ATSs, which, some of you have probably heard about. But what this means is that we need to think through the type of phrases and words that we're using in the document. Because again, that person who's reading your resume more than likely doesn't know what you do. So what they are doing in order to hire you or to pull you in for an interview is comparing your content against the job description, right? So they're going to have them side by side. If you don't have the same types of phrasing, or if your phrasing looks different, or it looks like it's coming from a different industry or sector, doesn't make sense to them, that's going to create some problems. right? And I see this happen quite a bit with, for instance, a lot of geoscientists who have wanted to change careers over the past year and a half because of the downturn. They want to become data analysts or, operations managers or something like that, but they're still defining themselves as geoscientists first, rather than defining themselves now as data analysts and then using that language that a data analyst would use in the job description. So just kind of an example of thinking through how you're still reverse engineering everything. You're using the job descriptions because of these different audiences, right? Because you got to catch their attention and you got to hold it. So the third level, if you make it through those two, is going to be the decision maker. And at this point, this person knows what you do, right? This person is more than likely, unless it's an interviewer who may or may not have a pretty good sense of what you do. But the department manager or executives, they're probably going to have a pretty good idea of what you bring to the table. So in general, and we'll get to this whenever we talk about networking is so important because you basically want to skip those first two audiences as much as you can. So if you can skip the gatekeeper and the computer scanning systems and get your resume straight to the decision maker, that's the best thing. I know it's not always possible, but that's what networking does for you, is if you're able to get it into the hands of that pro, right? So one of the most important things that I can say through any of this is be laser focused and don't make people work hard. Like, please spoon feed them, okay, as much as you can. Spoon feed them the content they want to hear. If you don't do that, someone else is going to look like a better fit, right? So please avoid being generic. Don't use generic terms. Be as specific as you possibly can about what sets you apart, right? All right, so formatting your resume, some basic best practices, white space and margins. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have said 1 inch all around because that was standard. Now, with how many people are on the market, recruiters and HR pros are asking for narrow margins. So they want as much content on the page as possible, and they want pages to be tightened up. So if you immediately open up a Word doc and you start putting in content, it's going to have the standard margins. And you're going to see that if you write, let's say a 2-page resume, it could be tightened up to, let's say you have 1.5 pages of content. You put it to narrow margins, more than likely that'll tighten up to 1 page. So that's what the margins do for you, is it allows you to basically be more succinct, more direct, and it allows you to process more information on the page so that a recruiter can get through the content a lot easier and faster. You want to use kind of a very common font style, preferably something sans serif, Arial, Veranda, Georgia. I use Arial all the time. That's pretty much the only font that I'll use in terms of the base content inside of a resume. And the reason for this is because there are differences in terms of how a Mac and a PC will process text. So you don't want to run into issues where you're using a really different weird font and it comes up really wonky when someone opens it on their Mac or when someone opens it on their PC. So what the sans serif font does is it's very standardized across both. So you're able to basically have that document be opened and with very minimal weirdness, right? It's not going to look wonky. It's not going to be all over the place. The font's going to be readable. So that's what we want, no matter who opens it on what system, that we can read it, right? Font size not below 10 point, please. If you start going lower than that, you have no idea what type of eye issues someone might have, as who's one of those audiences. If you go below that, you run into issues where people can't read your content, and that's a problem. Same thing if you go above something like 14 point in the body section, too big, right? And then you're basically taking up valuable real estate by using a font that's too large. Always list dates and cover gaps. Okay, if possible, month and year. Okay, whenever our HR pro sees only year, they're going, what are they hiding? Okay, so they're thinking you're trying to cover gaps by doing that, which if you are, okay, then you're going to have to explain it in an interview. They're still going to ask you what was going on. Okay, so if possible, month and year, and align them as much as possible. So let's say you had a 2 or 3 month gap between, two of your work experiences. Line it up, right? Don't have, 4 2006 to 5 2007, and then 7 2007 to 8 2008. Just line it up. Put it at 5. Okay. What this does is it keeps HR pros and recruiters from wondering or thinking of a gap and then having to ask questions about what you were doing during that gap. When if it's only 2 to 3 months, what you were doing was prepping for your new job. That's it. You were relocating or you were getting ready. And the 2 to 3 months, that's negligible. Now, if we get to 6 months or more, then you have to show the gap. Then it becomes an issue. Because then that's not just wiggle room. That's not just shifting from one job to another. That's actually a gap. So just something to keep in mind, just kind of streamlining, allowing things to line up. It just makes it a lot cleaner. This may not be relevant for, a lot of you guys, unless you're more advanced students, including a maximum of 10 years or approximately 4 positions. Give or take on this, past 10 years, unless someone is at a very high senior level, then we can do kind of an early career type thing, but that's less relevant for you guys. Avoid listing personal information. Please do not put your full address on your resume. All they need to know is the city and state. That's it. Houston, Texas. That way someone knows where you are and if you're going to need relocation. That's the only reason why they want to know your location. Okay. And also please avoid online resume templates. This is a big deal. Don't go to Etsy and find one of those super pretty, crazy looking templates and buy it. It's not going to do you any good. Building content onto a standard document is going to be your best bet, because what ends up happening is when you use those fancy templates, applicant tracking systems can't process that content very well. So it's trying to read all the graphics and the different formatting as a TXT document, and it's not parsing correctly. It's not going to parse correctly at all. It's going to be all wonky and all over the place. So just avoid them. All right, so here's an example, non-technical resume. Okay, so here's an example of how I might frame someone's content. So, at the very top, of course, you would have, name, location, you would have their email, their phone number, your LinkedIn hyperlink, which is a really, really important, great thing to include now. If you're a data analyst, or if you have projects on GitHub, or if you have a personal website, that's also the place to put that, right? Put that at the top, because that's going to be the first place that a recruiter or an HR pro is going to go to contact you for a job. So you want to make sure you're not bearing the lead, give them all the information that they need to be able to contact you and find out any important details about you, right? So instead of having a very generic top portion of a resume, which I see all the time, excels at project management, driven to support a growing company. It's like, yeah, we all are, right? That's why we're applying to jobs. Please don't be generic. Okay. Think through the hard data that you bring to the table. So, we'll use this. Okay. Customer focused business development and global sales support leader with a proven 13-year track record of building resilient customer relationships across North and South America, Europe, and Asia. Very direct, right? So we got 13 years. We got a heading that is preferably tailored to the job that they're applying for. We have the locations that they've worked in, okay? If they're claiming that they're global, that they do global work, all right, where have you sold? Right? So we're starting to answer questions. We're answering the who, what, when, where, why of what an HR pro is going to ask of you to figure out if you align with that job description. Secured all U.S. operations and boosted market share from 0 to 100% for up to 6 projects a month, totaling $250K in revenue for one of the largest and most challenging oil and gas clients, Shell Corporation. right? So again, giving specifics, right? So 0 to 100%, 6 projects a month, 250K, right? And you can do this with anything. One thing that I'm going to show you guys is that you don't have to have 13 years of experience to do this same thing. All you have to do is start quantifying what you've done. Let's say that you've also done, 3 projects in a semester that are based on, geophysical interpretation, and you've worked in 5-person teams, right? So you start quantifying the type of work that you've done so that you can build in scope to your resume. That's the most important thing, is building in scope, because the less scope we have, the less data we have, the less you're set apart, the more generic you look, right? This is death. This is death to your resume. So we don't want that. Known for exceeding expectations by managing international operations, preparing multi-million-dollar bundle tenders for countries outside of territorial scope of work in Trinidad and Tobago and Argentina. So again, all we're doing is just building out scope. We're basically outlining kind of a bird's eye view of someone and what they bring to the table for global sales and business development. You'll notice that every single one of these check marks is tailored to sales and business development. Okay, so that's the most important thing, is to have all that content completely tailored. Whenever you just put everything in the kitchen sink on there, that's when people lose interest, right? They don't want to look at it anymore because they're going, all right, I'm hiring for a drilling engineer, but all they're talking about is completions and production. Okay, why would I want to hire them? Right? So you have to snap alignment. You have to tighten it up to whatever they're looking for. Key skills and technology. All this does is it allows you to come up higher in applicant tracking systems, right? So the more phrases, the more terms you can have built into your resume, the better, because you're going to come up high in those searches, right? So you're highlighting your value. You're providing a summary or a snapshot using examples. Always, 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 please use examples. And I know that sometimes whenever you're first starting in your career, it's tough to think of examples, and it can be tough to think that, okay, all I've done is learn things. I haven't actually done things yet. Well, try to think through how that learning translates into hard skills, right? What is it that you're bringing to the table? Were you learning Python? Were you, were you building models and practicums? Were you, what was it that you were doing in your classes that can be classified as value added for a company, right? So start thinking of those, and don't doubt yourself, right? All of us, whenever we're switching out of being in the university level, we all have imposter syndrome. Okay. All of us feel like, I had it at 31 when I was getting my doctorate, right? It was like, oh, I've never had a real job. I've only been in academia. They're going to see through me. They're going to think that, I just know stuff. I can't do stuff. So it's your job to prove to them that you can do stuff. And I started realizing, as I brainstormed and thought about what it was that I did, that the things that I was doing as an academic actually aligned really well with something called program management, right? So it took some thinking. It took some looking at a lot of job descriptions. And this applies to any job that you're searching for. Doesn't matter if it's a program manager or if it's a reservoir engineer, whatever, right? It comes down to brainstorming and thinking of what you bring to the table for that. Right, data, using job descriptions. So again, just another example of, kind of building out some career impacts, something that's really going to catch someone's attention. You'll notice every single area on the resumes that I build out has tons of numbers, lots of numbers, lots of data, right? 15 years, 10 direct reports, 200 outside brokers, 300 million. This is something that as you continue in your careers, keep track of this data. Please, please, please keep track of it. Even if you just have a running document that you just have the job, right? You have, let's say, reservoir engineer, your company, and then the month. And you're just putting in content. You're like, oh man, I just finished up this project and I optimize operations and it looks like I optimized them by, 25%. Plop that in the document. Don't even have to look at it again for another year, but just having it built in there, it keeps you from having to go back retroactively and try to figure out everything you did, right? This is true for internships. This is true for volunteering. Anything you do professionally. Don't say, oh yeah, I'll remember that later. You won't. Okay, you won't. And then you'll be building out your resume and banging your head against a wall going, oh, crap, I can't remember what I did in this role. I know I did a lot of really good stuff, but I can't remember what it was. So that running document is going to help you stay on track. So then you can basically just take that content, redraft it, and plop it onto your resume, right? So technical resumes. So these are, a little bit different, but still similar, right? So I used a senior geoscientist example here, a prospect geologist. So we're doing the same thing, guys. 6-year track record, North America, West Africa, Middle East. One main distinction that I would say in oil and gas, if you're a geoscientist, reservoir engineer, drilling engineer, whatever, think of also the formations and the basins that you've worked in, okay? Because this person didn't tell me, but if they had, I would have built in Permian Basin, Eagle Ford, Haynesville, right? Because that stuff is really, really important in oil and gas. The more that you can build out that specific formation experience, the more tailored you look. Proven experience in prospect generation, reservoir geology, drilling operations. Let's see, data integration, data mining experience using Petrel, right? Solving technical challenges. They're an SME, working with IOCs, NOCs, right? And this was an oil and gas resume. So I wasn't so concerned with more of the general acronyms that are used in oil and gas. Now, if they had been specific acronyms to ExxonMobil, then I would have been concerned because then more, people wouldn't have known the specific ExxonMobil acronym. But international and national oil companies, that's IOCs, that's pretty standard. You'll also notice that I included a section right below ExxonMobil here with a description. Okay, so a lot of recruiters now are actually asking for a brief description of the companies. This actually helps you get through applicant tracking systems a lot better. It's really great content. And it also helps build out scope. So that's going to tell a recruiter or an HR pro basically the type of environment you are working in. And that's going to vary based off of if you're working for a private equity backed company as opposed to a multinational Fortune 500. Right. So it helps build in scope of what you did, what sets you apart. Because if you're saying in ExxonMobil that you were, working with 20-person teams across 3 different regions, and you're doing this with ExxonMobil, that's impressive, right? I mean, you're doing a lot of work for a big company that's making a big impact. So just kind of think through, how you're building out your content. And for them, I built out different regions of where they'd worked, right? Ghana operations, West Africa, new opportunities, Kurdistan. So they wanted to break down the regions that they had been in. So rather than talking about basins or formations, because they were mainly international, we talked more about countries. So senior geoscientist, upstream business development, yeah. You'll also notice here that I put release due to COVID-19. Okay, so this is a big deal. Letting someone know that you were released due to something outside of your control, rather than just leaving it up to an assumption. You don't want to leave that to assumption. Okay, you want to let them know you weren't fired for cause. You didn't do anything wrong. You were let go because of an economic downturn. And as we go into 2022, people are going to start forgetting the time period that COVID happened in. Okay, they're going to start forgetting that people, millions were let go in blanket layoffs. Okay, so we need to remind them on our resume why you were released. It just really helps. It helps someone as you're looking at your resume go, oh, okay, yeah. So that's why it was only 8 months, right? So just keep that in mind. You'll also notice that I'm really using the top fourth portion in all the resumes. This top fourth portion is almost like a hook in an essay. You don't want to bury the lead. You want them to see all the meat up front. You want it to be very direct. Okay, so reviewing job descriptions. This is a big deal. And when you first start doing it, it'll be time consuming. It'll be annoying, but it'll be worth it once you start doing it more and more. Right? So you'll notice that I highlighted certain portions, and I wanted to show this because it's really helpful if you either have an option where you can have a stylus and highlight things, or print out the job description and highlight certain sections so that you actually can compare the job description to your resume side by side and see what the gap, where the gaps are, what's missing, because that's what's going to help you align your content. Right. So you'll notice that one of the first things I've highlighted up here is the regions that Neighbors Drilling is in. Okay. So North America, international marketplaces. Okay. So they're mainly based here in the US, but they're positioned to service North America and international marketplaces. Okay. So always keep in the back of your mind when you're looking at these, where they might send you and where the locations most likely will be. Okay, because that's important for you personally to be thinking through, okay, if I want to join this company, they could send me to any part of Texas. They could send me to Alaska, North Dakota, Northeast Wyoming, right? You never know where you're going to get sent. Okay, so just be thinking through longevity with a company. Look up other people who work at the company, look at other jobs that are available. Where are they located? If they service international marketplaces, do they send people abroad? Shellebarger is the perfect example of a company that sends people abroad every year. They send them somewhere new, right? You're going all over the place. You're going to France, Algeria, you're going to, Saudi, you're going all over the place. So it's just good to vet the company so that you have a sense of what your career trajectory is going to look like. Okay, so drilling performance engineer. So if we go back here, that would go up here. That's going to be your heading. So drilling performance engineer. All right, first part of the tailoring. Okay, provide support to the product line. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I basically build out this section, this key skills section. Okay, provide support to the product line support, engaging the customer engagement, drilling and remote operations, that stands alone, training groups and technical support, drilling mechanics, right? So what I'm doing is I'm highlighting the key terms. I'm going through and I'm figuring out what key terms I want to build into the skills section so that I come up higher in the job description, right? Whenever it goes through the applicant tracking system. So it's just kind of a best practice to get into, to start doing that. Then once we get into the rest of the responsibilities, the bullet points, you want to really focus on at least the top 5 bullet points. Those are the bullet points that have been changed by the HR pro. The ones that are near the bottom, those are the standard ones that they keep in all the time. Okay. So really hone in on the top portion of the job description. Provide in-depth drilling performance analysis, extending beyond the scope of basic report interpretation, interaction with customer and field personnel, drilling performance metrics, tools and methodologies, product performance reports. All of these things, you can start thinking through, okay, do I have these skills? Have I done these things? Or could I do these things? Right? Because you can do things like, say, driven to, gaining competency in, right? So you can start developing those things so that then you look like the right fit, you're building in the right type of content. But see if you can use some of the terms from the job description and then use your own example, right? So provided in-depth drilling performance analysis by interacting with customers and field personnel across 3 different regions for 2 projects, right? That would probably be an example of how I would build out a bullet point for someone and tailor it to what they actually did, right? So you're pulling that content, but you're snapping it to your own experience. Okay, so here's an example of, you know, a senior manager, service operations and analytics for actually a solar company. Service operations manager will be responsible for, this is going to be the thing that they're going to ask you to do. Overseeing the daily back office operations that provide support to internal technicians, third-party service providers, installation partners, and customers. That is going to be your job. That one sentence. That's the core of what you're going to be doing in this role. Okay, so you really want to zero in on thinking through, okay, do I have experience doing any of that? Could I gain experience doing that? Is there any aspect of this that I could use to tailor in my resume, right? And this job description actually gives you a rundown. This position requires leadership to exceed customer expectations, grow and develop their employees, execute the business plan, improve efficiencies through process improvement and innovation, and solve complex problems with ambiguous data. They literally lined it up for you. They just said, here you go. Here's what we want from you. Can you do it? Right? So pull that content and use it to your advantage. Okay, kind of like what I have here. Pull out your current resume, highlight the phrases, research the company, pick up on hard and soft skills. I have a lot of people ask me about soft skills. Should I include soft skills? Only include soft skills if you can use an example. So if you go to your key skills section here, right, this thing up here, and you start putting things like interpersonal communication, what's another one I see all the time? Analytical thinking, very generic terms that anyone could have on their resume. If you're adding those things just standalone, they're not going to matter, right? An HR pro is going to look at those and go, okay, how did you use analytical skills? How have you used interpersonal communication? Okay, just putting it in a bullet point means nothing. It means nothing to them. So if you do use those soft skills in there, you have to use an example, right? So maintained strong interpersonal communication, working with a geotechnical team of 20 staff on 4 major projects, right? That's an example of how you could build in a soft skill while still marrying it to an actual example, right? Okay. And then we have job requirements. Please, please, please. Honestly, the first thing you should do is go to this section. If they have it in a job description, you want to go to the requirements because you want to see if you're actually a good fit. Okay. So if you don't have a bachelor's degree, field business finance, you don't have 3+ years of leadership experience, you know, start running down and see if you have at least 70% of what they're looking for. Okay. If you don't, then you really need to reconsider or think of how you're phrasing what you bring to the table. Okay. Maybe you don't have strong home construction, residential electrical knowledge, but you've worked in aspects of construction in the oil and gas sector, right? EPC work or something like that. Think of how, and this is what I mean by transferable skills, think of how you can spin that. Okay. By spin, I don't mean lie. By spin, I mean thinking through how it might be phrased differently in a different sector, right? Okay, so I'm just very briefly going to show you this because I see this type of resume all the time. Please don't use this type of resume. It doesn't process through tracking systems very well. Okay, now it has a lot of really good content on here. Okay, manage application processes, conduct interviews for over 15 leadership development programs annually. Great. Okay, great content. The structure is problematic for a tracking system. This type of resume would be okay if you're sharing and networking with it, if you're sharing it with people, but not if you're trying to put it through tracking systems. It's just going to really annoy you. All right. So this is an example of just a lot of content being kind of plopped onto the document without any real structure. Okay, and I see this quite a bit with early career professionals, also including references. You don't need to include references on here. They'll ask for them if they want to pull you in for an interview or if they like what they saw. Okay, again, good content. You know, they have patents, publications, recognition, but we have bolding, we have italics, we have, you know, it's hard to know where to look here, right? So you want to kind of streamline and make sure that everything is lined up. If you look back at, oh, I have things structured here, right? You'll see that I have the company name, date, the title, a brief blurb on basically an overview of what they did, and then go into bullet points. This is a very standard structure that an applicant tracking system can process easily, and that will actually make sense for someone reading that content. They're gonna go, okay, they were with Exxon for this amount of time. Okay, you know, this is what they did in this role. Okay, here's some achievements. All right, and that's the structure that an HR pro is looking for. This is extremely confusing. Okay. So cover letters, you know, just briefly touch on cover letters, because cover letters really are just a way of conveying your fit for the company, and also highlighting some key achievements that you've done. You want to stick to one page. Don't go beyond one page. Open, closing salutation, preferably include an actual signature at the close. I'll even do a JPEG of someone's signature and add that to the bottom in the salutation. It looks cleaner, very professional, put together. Give readers some visual interest, break up the content with bullet points. Okay, so what I mean by this is you can have a section near the bottom that has like 3 bullet points of some core achievements of what you did. The rest can be in paragraphs, but have that section that has some of your achievements so that then it breaks up the eye. The eye is going to be naturally drawn to the bullet points, right? So, pardon me, it's going to allow someone to actually want to read all of your content rather than going, oh my gosh, these giant block paragraphs, my eyes are bugging out, right? Please avoid those things because nobody wants to read them. Okay. Again, calling attention to your data and proven accomplishments. With a cover letter, you can inject some personality. Okay. A resume is very direct, very concise, but a cover letter is one of those things where you can actually convey your volunteering. You can talk about, you know, your career trajectory. You can use some aspects of maybe a personal statement, you know, of where you're coming from, right? If you have a very unique story of what brings you to the table, you know, whatever sector you're in. So that's kind of a basic overview. And LinkedIn. Okay, so I go from cover letter to LinkedIn because LinkedIn, you should see LinkedIn as a combination between a resume and a cover letter put together. Okay, so LinkedIn is a public profile that basically allows you to have personality, but it also allows you to showcase your top professional, you know, career achievements and skill sets and things like that. So you want to make sure that on LinkedIn, you're building out a complete profile. And LinkedIn will be really annoying and it'll keep reminding you to add a photo or your location or a new work entry. It's not doing this because it's trying to be annoying. It's doing this because it wants you to get found. Okay. So the less content you have, the less chance you have of being found for roles. So you want to make sure that your profile is an all-star profile, and it will tell you when you hit all-star. You're going to have an about and summary. You're going to have work experience. You're going to have a photo, location, a headline, everything completely built out from top to bottom. It's going to ask you to add key skills at the bottom. Don't ignore that. Build out all 50 skills. You want to add them all. Okay. Again, visual interest, please don't do the block paragraph thing. If your about and summary section is like this amount of content and you have no breakup, no one's going to read it. Okay. Just remember, people have zero time. Okay. So the more that you can break up your content, the better. Bless you. Same thing. You'll see the same. Call attention to data, inject some personality. It's a combination between a resume and a cover letter. Right? Keep your work experience very fresh. If you were let go due to COVID-19, or you had a very brief internship, you know, you had an internship that was supposed to be a year long and you only hit 4 months, let them know you were released due to COVID. Okay, let them know. Make sure that you always have a current work experience that is tailored to what you're trying to hit. Okay, I'll say that again. Make sure you have a current work experience, something that says to present, even if you're job seeking. Okay, and that title needs to be focused on the job that you're trying to hit. So if that's petroleum engineer, that entry needs to say petroleum engineer dash actively job seeking. Okay, from X date to present. What this does is it allows you to get found. Okay, because when recruiters are searching for people, they're hitting a button on their end that says look for people who are currently employed. They're not hitting the button that says previously employed, because you could end up with people who were let go in 2017 and haven't worked since. Right? So they want current employment so that they know people have fresh skills. Okay, so that's why it's so important to build out this section. LinkedIn outreach. Oh my God, so important. Have to do it. I know it's annoying. I know it's frustrating. I know it's just scary, but you have to do it. Okay, so to find your ideal type of job, you have to do some searching. You have to look up people at the companies you want to work at. You have to talk to people who already do the job you want to do. Okay, so again, you're reverse engineering your job search. Think of key terms for the roles you want to pursue. And reaching out, of course, with a genuine heart and a purpose, you know, rather than just reaching out and having a very standard, you know, let's say your outreach is, you know, comprised of, you know, 2 paragraphs about you and then a very brief, I'd like to chat with you about what it is you do. Would you happen to have, you know, 5 minutes sometime? You're not really going to get a response, right? Unless someone is really nice. You need to keep it brief, to the point, and you need to consider the other person. Okay, so they have a profile for a reason too. That means you need to go on their profile and see what it is they're doing so that you can talk about that thing and link it to what you want to do, right? So basically, you're just finding alignment between you and this other person. Just like if you were at a networking event, you know, let's say you walked up to someone and they're like, oh, hey, what do you do? And you say, oh, I do X. They go, oh, okay, well, I do Y. And you're going, oh, okay, that's interesting. We should chat about XYZ. What LinkedIn does is it allows you to do that work without actually being at a networking event. You can look on their profile, see what it is they do, think of how that aligns with you, and then do the outreach that way, right? You're always thinking, okay, what do I say? What do I want to ask? Well, think of 3 meaningful questions, right? You already have your goal in mind. Your goal is to be a petroleum engineer at X companies. Now backtrack and say, okay, how can this person help me get there? Right? So have 3 meaningful questions lined up of how that could help. If you want to connect, always include a request note. Always. Don't just click connect. The more that you do that, the less people will connect with you. Okay, and expect rejection. Please, this is very normal. This is a very healthy, normal part of outreach and networking. You will get rejected. You will get ghosted. Don't take it personally. You have no idea how many people have, you know, 3 kids or, you know, zero time, they're working 2 jobs. You don't know their situation. You also don't know how often they check their LinkedIn. Maybe they don't check their LinkedIn messages, in which case you should probably follow up with them through email, right? And there will be those people who just never get back to you, ever. And that's okay. All right, that's perfectly normal. Avoid burnout. Please avoid burnout, because this will be death to you getting a job. You have to network, so you also have to think of techniques to avoid the burnout of it. Break up your job search into small, manageable time segments. 15, 30, 45 minutes is very doable. If you go on 2-hour blocks, you're going to end up burning yourself out like crazy. Okay. Set realistic goals. Reach out, build your network. Securing roughly 3 informational interviews per week is a really good place. It's a really good goal to have. Never let the ball drop on reaching out, please. Take the initiative, prepare questions, follow up with purpose. If they don't get back to you, follow up the next week. If they don't get back to you, follow up the next week, or find a better way to reach out to them. Try email instead of just LinkedIn messaging. Take every opportunity to put a face to your name. Really, really important. If they're open to doing a Zoom, do a Zoom. Okay, because it's going to be a lot tougher to forget you if they see your face. Thinking outside that industry box, combining your research from job descriptions with real life examples from your informational interviews. So this is where you start putting things into practice. Now you have your main target, your reverse engineering, you are networking, you're talking to people who do the job that you want to get. Now you're putting that together. Okay, so remember that your idea of a position, it may not reflect the reality. This happened to me a ton when I was trying to get out of academia. I thought grant writing was going to be it. That was going to be what I was going to do. I started talking to grant writers and realized, I don't want to do that. It's boring, right? So the more that I learned from people who actually did that job, the more I actually helped hone my job search, right? People want to help. They genuinely do. Sometimes they have very little time to do it, but they genuinely want to help. So asking them as an early grad how they entered the industry and use their example to your benefit, right? Try to use their example so that you can work smarter. What pitfalls did they run into? Because that can actually help you a lot in your job search. All right, so some key takeaways. Target your resume as closely as possible to job descriptions. Make a recruiter's job easy. Have those separate sections that highlight your strengths, proven results. Always be prepared to answer questions about employment gaps. Be clean, concise. One thing to keep in mind too is uploading a resume in a doc or a docx instead of a PDF, unless they ask for it. Like I know that Shell asks for a PDF. If they ask for it, give it to them. Otherwise, upload a doc or a docx because it's going to allow more information to parse through the ATS. Okay, a PDF is not going to allow as much information because it's basically trying to read it. It's trying to read left to right like a TXT, and the PDF doesn't allow that because the format's fixed. Okay, and then make your mantra: research, reach out, and repeat. Do it over and over. All right, there it is. I know we're, have a little bit of time. I'm definitely open to going over a little bit here if anyone has questions.
Yes, so thank you so much, Amanda, for the so informative presentation. Looking at the chat, I didn't receive any questions. So participants, please feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions.
Yeah, I do have 2 questions. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I have a few questions, Amanda, if you...
Sure, go for it.
Thank you for all the information, ma'am. I really appreciate that. And thank you, SP, for conducting this. I'm about to graduate, and for me, finding a nice job, it's kind of necessity right now. Most of the time, few things I come across, like you mentioned a lot of stuff, which was like literally helpful, but adding to the bullet point, the one question I have is about the bullet points. You want to add those bullet points, what they are looking for, and that will make impact in your resume, especially in the computer screening thing. I forgot the exact term for it. So adding those bullet points, sometimes I feel like it's not me. If I'm adding a lot of things which is not exactly me, it's like lying about yourself. That's one thing I always feel.
Yeah.
Second thing, yeah, go ahead, man. Then I will ask her.
Oh yeah, no. So, and that's what I mean about picking the things that actually align with what you do, right? So we're never lying. We are never, going through and, I mean, always thinking through that the resume is something you're going to have to speak to in an interview. So that resume needs to be you. So as much as you can, you're pulling the terms, right? You're pulling the terms of what they're looking for. You're not necessarily taking everything that they want and just plopping it into your resume, right? You're combining your actual experience with the terms of what they're looking for. So if they're looking for someone, you may define the work that you've done as working with, clients, and they're looking for customers, vendors, and third-party contractors. Okay, have you worked with those people, right? If so, then that's the term that you should use instead of just clients. That's what I'm meaning. I'm not meaning change everything about yourself or only use their terms. If things don't align, then they don't align. And then you need to reconsider if that job is actually a good fit for you. But what I'm meaning is using the phrases that they use so that you can, get through the ATS a lot easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Thank you. Like lately, I've been coming across a lot of entry-level jobs. Even though it's entry-level, they're asking for 3-year experience.
I know.
So yeah, this is kind of bizarre, and it's really hard to go line with it. Like most of the time, it's minimum requirement 3-year experience, and it's posted under entry-level job position. What you have to say about that, and what you suggest to us as an applicant?
Well, it's extremely frustrating. I mean, I've even seen entry-level positions require a Ph.D. I've seen this happen. And I'm going, whoa, that's kind of insane. So whenever you don't have a piece of what they're looking for, then you don't have it. It is what it is, right? If a company is going to be ridiculous enough to require 2 years of experience for an entry-level job, then that's on them. The candidates that they're going to get are going to be entry level. They're not going to have 2 years of experience. So, all you can do is just use and leverage the information and the experience that you do have, at the university level, maybe thinking through some of the, if you've had internships or if you've done any real world projects in your courses that you've taken. I mean, all of those things can feed into experience. Right? Maybe you haven't been with Exxon for 2 years, but you've been doing, projects in your field for, over 2 years, since you were doing your sophomore year or something like that. And that's how you can kind of frame your content. The most important thing is to think outside of the knowledge box. I know this, I know that, and think, okay, I can do this. I do that. Okay. That's the most challenging thing for us coming from an academic space, because our training so far has been in knowing things, learning things, but now we have to shift to an idea of doing things, right? So as long as you can use that, use that doing type of perspective, then that comes across as experience. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am, it does. My final question, I think. So I mean, I came across those experiences like ghosting and all kind of stuff. You write somebody and they never respond, and it's keep happening. I don't know, writing emails about the interview and we don't know what's going on with them. And if you write them back, you never have back from them. Yeah. So it's happening a lot. But I mean, we have to keep working, I guess, and keep trying, knocking all the doors. But the third most, the question I had about that one is, about the CV is like most of the CVs, if you come across, they have common terms, common things, common skills. So how to make an impact as far as the CV wise is concerned?
Well, that comes down to building in data, right? So kind of what I've been hammering in, this whole presentation is that you have to build in data that sets you apart. The more that you do that, the less generic you'll look. So, as much as you can quantify the things that you've done, 3 projects, 5-person teams, these types of things, right? As you're building out data, that's what's going to help you come across as a really strong candidate, even if you're only doing it in small ways, right? Because if you're entry level, you're probably only going to be able to do it in small ways. You also want to leverage any volunteer experience you have, right? If you're in a leadership position with SPE, if you're a member, if you're involved at all, use that too. Entry-level candidates, the more leadership you have, the better. I mean, that just shows up as experience for you too. So be thinking about using this is what I mean by kind of brainstorming, right? You kind of go through as you're starting to reverse engineer your job search, you do that brainstorming, you have that document where you're building out that content that's going to be helpful for you. And you may start with a bullet point that says, all right, I did a project that was focused on geophysical interpretation. Okay, what else, right? It's like auditing your bullet points. You're like interrogating them. Who, what, when, where, why? Who did I work with? Where was it? When did I do it? How long did it take? That's how you build out the data, right? That's how you start building out your content. Because if you're only going to have a 1-page resume, it better be as hard hitting as possible. You want to do it right the first time. And that may take a little bit of time, but it's going to be worth it.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your help.
Good thing.
Okay. Hi, Amanda. Thank you for your presentation. I think it was a really great insights for us. It's a quick one. I want to ask, what about the educational aspects, like a Ph.D., a master's here, a BSc here, with the issue of dates for the educational aspects? Do we really have to specify, the specific dates of graduation? Because I've seen some presentations or some HR people say that's not necessary. Some people even say the educational section is not even really necessary. What's your thought on that?
Oh, you have to have an education section, 100%. That's a basic requirement for any job. And they're going to want to know what you got your degree in. You do not have to include the dates.
Okay.
They don't care about that as long as you finished it. If it's still pending, if you haven't finished it yet, then you're going to want to put in parentheses pending completion 2022 or something like that, right? But if you have your bachelor's, your master's, your PhD, whatever, you don't have to put the dates next to it. And actually, as you continue in your career, it's going to be smart to leave those off, because people will start backdating your age. And you could run into age discrimination if, I work with a lot of senior level people, and they'll have dates that go all the way back to the 70s and 80s. And I'm going, why are you doing this to yourself? Like, take those off. So yeah, it's, you're still fresh. So it's not going to be a big deal now, but either way, you just don't need to have them there.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
You can go ahead, Mona, if you have questions.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the other attendees in case they do have questions. Thank you, Nadia. Well, I do have 2 quick questions. Let's say, for instance, my master's is in geophysics. So I've been dealing with like seismic, etc., geophysical interpretation. Then my PhD, I'm doing something else. I'm more focused on petroleum engineering, hydraulic frac, reservoir engineering, etc. So for instance, I'm looking for a job or an internship, and within the same company, they are offering 2 positions, one for a reservoir engineer and one for a geoscientist. So I honestly would like to apply for both, since I do have a passion for geoscience, and then I want to learn more when it comes to reservoir engineering. So does it harm if I'm applying for both positions within the same company?
No, you should apply for both. But what they're going to look for is for you to tailor your content differently for both of those positions, right? So just make sure you're not submitting the exact same resume for both, because they will see that. They will see if you just submitted the same resume, and they could go, oh yeah, I see, that she for both. That could happen. But you always want to do your due diligence in terms of making sure that you tailor your content to whichever role you're applying for, because they are different. So
okay, because sometimes I'm like thinking the HR would be, oh, how come she's showing like that level of interest in this position and the same in the other? So this person is just not being honest.
No, it's not that you're not being honest. They'll be able to see that you're just you're a good fit for both. And I mean, I've had a lot of clients who've applied for one job and the HR pro has actually reached out to them for a different job. Where they say, oh, we actually have this one open. I actually think this one would be a better fit for you. You should have applied for that one too.
Yeah.
So it's all
that
about.
Happened for me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Then one other question is the fact that myself, oh, by the way, thank you so much for that. I didn't know that. For instance, myself, I've been working with Shellebarger. I've been released because of COVID, but I was not mentioning that on my resume. I will do. Now, the point is, when I've been released, then I had kind of a gap. It wasn't really a gap, but let's say a gap between my first job within Shellebarger and then starting again another role in the oil industry. So I was just doing something else. I mean, it wasn't really a gap because I was working somewhere else where it was kind of a communication after stuff. So, but that was a work. Do you think if I'm applying for something in oil and gas, it would worth it to mention that I have been working somewhere else? Because sometimes I'm just thinking, oh, it's not that relevant to mention this.
If you have a gap, you do want to fill it with something. So, okay. I mean, the most important thing is that if you have a gap and you've been doing something else, that you fill it with something relevant. So what I see happen a lot is that people will do something kind of different in the interim, and they won't even really try to align what they did with what they're shooting for now. And it just looks wonky, right? It just looks like, okay, what are you doing over here? So as much as you can see, if you were doing consulting for, let's say, geophysical work.
I mean, I was doing something different from the oil and gas completely for 6 months. Yeah.
Okay. And if you had that, then I think mentioning COVID, right, is going to be helpful, that, you took on this different work due to challenges with COVID, and, we're actively job searching within the oil and gas industry while doing XYZ, right? So you're doing is the best you can to snap alignment to your target, but you're also filling that gap that you'll have, because, an HR pro will ask. They're going to ask about that gap anyway. So it's just best to let them know up front. Some people will say, leave it off, and then they'll ask a question whenever you hit the interview. I'm of the mind that you at least give a very brief description, because every HR pro I've chatted with, you don't want them to make assumptions. You don't want any assumptions. You just want it on the table, but you want it to be direct, so you don't want to beat around the bush either. You want it to be very, direct in terms of what you were doing. Keep it very brief so that you're not taking up a whole lot of space on that. You're just you're having a streamlined career history, and you're prioritizing the stuff that does matter for your oil and gas target.
So you would recommend putting it in the resume, right?
Very brief description. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. How long was the gap?
It was like, I guess 6 months. Yeah.
Okay. 6 months is that weird interim that you can either keep it or leave it off. I would say if you were at the 8 month to a year mark, then you definitely need it on there. But if you run into situations where it's really going to be distracting, 6 months is not that big of a deal. So it's really up to your own discretion. I'm doing this thing here because it's up to your own discretion, but you would be fine leaving it off if you needed to. If it were more than 6 months, I'd be like, no, you got to put it on there. But an HR pro is going to be much less worried about a 6 month gap than they would a 8 month to a year long gap. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone have a question. So I have one question. So as international candidate, like it is sometimes challenging to get opportunity, job, or even internship.
Yeah.
Due to the U.S. work
Right.
permit. So what is your advices or recommendation to overcome this challenge?
That's a big question, and it's different for every person, right? I mean, I could give you an answer and it wouldn't apply to 60% of the rest of the other people who are on the line here. The most important thing is to be very upfront about where you're at with work authorization. That's going to be a big question whenever you interview. You could run into issues where you don't get pulled into interviews because your location is somewhere else, right? So always keep that in mind. If you do have work authorization for a certain number of months, and that's going to expire, that's going to be a question you need to be ready to answer in an interview. Like right off the bat, you have to have an answer prepared. Okay. So one of the best things that I can say is to be prepared from top to bottom for the questions, for the paperwork, for like every aspect of talking about work authorization. Because you're right. I mean, a lot of companies Schlumberger was number one for hiring people and, basically, sponsoring, right? That was 100% what they did. Weatherford did the same a lot. But things have just shut down so bad. I mean, the last administration and then, everything that's happened with COVID, it's like companies fired all their higher ups and then they just didn't want to go through the work of doing any sponsorships as well. So it's been really, really tough for international students to get that authorization. Do your best to be working through the process so that whenever you do hit interviews, you can let them know a timeline, right? So again, just having as many things answered up front as possible. Also be very, very cautious about listing a wrong address. Okay. I've talked to a lot of people who have said, oh, well, I'm currently based in North Dakota, but this job is in Houston. I have a cousin in Houston. I could easily transfer there. So I'm just going to put Houston on the resume. Be very, very careful about doing that. A lot of HR pros will see that as lying, and they'll see that as really unethical. So wherever your home address is, your permanent address is, that needs to be what you list, wherever you're living. If you're at a university and your permanent address is student housing, you can list that, right? You are in North Dakota. If you do have work authorization, if you are a citizen, if you have anything like that, you guys know this better than most, that whenever you have, a foreign sounding name in oil and gas, sometimes people will pass you up just because of that. So if you do have work authorization, if I had to do this on my husband's resume, right? Rico, everyone just assumed he was, from Mexico, didn't have work authorization, not a US citizen. He's a US citizen. So I had to keep putting on his resume, US citizen. I mean, it's sad, like we shouldn't have to do this all the time. But if you have, a specific status, green card status or anything like that, it is wise to put that in the top section of the resume. So next to your location, it can be helpful to put that. It can also be helpful to put open to relocation or remote to let them know that you're open to relocating, or that you're in the process of, getting a green card or whatever the case may be. Okay, so it's generally best to put that up in the contact details section so that you just get it out of the way. And, like an HR pro can either take it or leave it, basically.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So if you don't have anything to add, by the end of the presentation.
I would like to follow Nadia's question, yes, because that's an important one. Sometimes you just go to the company website and they are asking you if you actually would require in the future any sponsorship. And sometimes you hear from others, just hit the none button and in the interview show yourself, you will be taken for sure. because if they will know that you are a good profile, they will just take you. So how correct is that actually?
That's a good question. And that every HR pro will give you a different answer on that, right? Okay. So same HR pros will say, no, you need to be upfront and honest. You need to, click the button. Others will say, well, there's some wiggle room there because depending on the person, it may be better to just explain it in person. Yeah. I completely leave that up to the discretion of, okay, people only know what you tell them. All right. So by giving yourself the opportunity to answer that in an interview, rather than just have that button clicked, because that will disqualify you for most things, right? Yeah. So if you're able to answer that in an interview, then that at least gives you leverage to where you can clarify what's going on with your situation, right? So if you feel like you have a more complex situation than clicking that box suggests, then, then basically do the thing that's going to allow you to proceed. Okay. As long as you're not outright lying about something, then if there's like some wiggle room there that you'd be able to justify in an interview, then that's what matters. How comfortable are you answering that in an interview? Because that question will happen. That question will come up. Yeah. Just be like, all right, I have that answer prepped. We're good to go. Because if you walk in with no answer, that's when you're in trouble. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? I think I have time for one more question.
Thank you. Yes, I have one question, please.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in my last job, I have 5 years experience.
9 years?
My 5 years. My company consider that I have 5 years of experience because I get a training of 2 years in one of the schools that school is a school which is the company school.
Okay.
So where do I put that 2 years in experience or in education?
As much as you can, put things in experience. If you count it as an experience, if you were aligned with the company, even if it was through the university. I mean, because this is very similar to kind of almost an internship type thing, right? If there's alignment to where you can explain it as professional experience and you feel comfortable explaining it that way in an interview, put it in work experience, because work experience will count a lot more. If you put it in education, it's going to be lower to the bottom. People might be confused about if this was actually just an academic position. So, I mean, I do this all the time. You just put it in work experience and, you have your title, you have the company, you can put this was aligned with the university, just clarify. And that's it, right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I mean, you can always just give a brief explanation. If you ever have any questions about, should this go here or there? Well, work experience counts most. So can I justify it as work experience, first of all? And second of all, could I just give a brief explanation clarifying if they have any questions that, yes, this was aligned through the university, but I was working with X company.
Do you have room for one more question, please? It's a follow-up.
Okay. One more, then I'm going to hop off.
Yeah, it's what he asked. Do HR pros consider research assistantship during your education, during your master's or your Ph.D. as work experience? The reason why I'm asking this is because in my master's, I was a research assistant, but it was working for another company, but I was still a research assistant. So in that case, where do I place that research assistantship position? Can I consider it as an experience?
Yep, that's experience too. And that's actually, so a good way to think about this is, was I working, with a separate company in a company culture? And second of all, was I developing skills, not just knowledge, right? Yeah. So if I was developing skills, right, I was a research assistant, I wasn't just learning, I was actually doing projects. I was supporting X for the company. I was working in teams. I was, right, you have all these different things going on. That counts as work experience, not just taking courses and stuff like that. Okay. education should really just be composed of the degrees that you got. You know, the rest of it, you know, if you had research assistantships, internships, even, you know, volunteering that you've done, that all can go in professional experience. Because as an entry-level candidate, you're going to have very little to work with, right? So anything that you can leverage, anything that you can think of as professional experience, put it in there. And then just remember that, okay, I'm a little bit nervous about putting this in here. Can I justify this? If you feel too nervous about it, then it probably needs to go somewhere else because you will get questions, right? Just remember the interview process is meant to poke holes. Okay, it's meant to poke holes. It's meant to figure out what it is you bring to the table. All of these things are just a core part of interviewing. So you need to be ready for them. And if you're uncomfortable at all with any of that, then you have to kind of back up and go, okay, reconsider.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate it. You know, thank you so much for having me today. I hope that everybody's, you know, having a good little break here, and looks like we're going to be going into 2022 pretty soon. So, you know, I have my contact details here. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I post almost every day. My website, my email, feel free to reach out to me through email. It's usually a lot faster to get a hold of me that way because my LinkedIn message inbox just gets packed. So yeah, if you have any other questions or need guidance or anything, I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Oh, sure.
And then thank you for answering all the questions. And have a great Thanksgiving and Christmas.
I know it, right? Yep, everything happening.
No, thank you so much, Amanda, for your time, for all the advices and information you shared with us. And thank you for the participant to taking part in this presentation. So we look forward to another opportunities with you, Amanda. So thank you so much. Have a great day.
My pleasure. You too. Have a good day, guys.
All right.
Bye.